This first segment is a warning to people across the United States, as well as the rest of the world. As this monkeypox hoax rolls out, and they're scaring people into running for yet another vaccination, please be advised that this could be an attempt to actually create a worldwide smallpox pandemic for the next shutdown and attempted annihilation of the human race. More than 100 million doses of ACAM 2000 were added to the Strategic National Stockpile in the years after the September 11th attacks and anthrax attacks, as a hedge, supposedly, against the return of smallpox. Gee, how did they know? Unlike Jynneos, which is not capable of replicating in the human body, ACAM 2000 contains live, I repeat, live, replication-competent vaccinia virus. If the vaccination site is not cared for properly for the 2 to 6 weeks it takes to heal, the vaccinia virus can spread to other parts of the body, including the eyes and the genitals. It is not just the vaccine recipient who's at risk after ACAM 2000 inoculation. Household members and others who come into close contact with the recipient are also at risk of developing smallpox infection. I want to take you through the package insert. First of all, in picture 1, and you can download these documents. ACAM 2000 is produced by Sanofi Pasteur. You can just put in your URL, ACAM 2000 PI or package insert, and you too can download the PDF. And I urge you to do so. Taking a look at picture 1, this is just a snapshot of the title page. And you see the black box on the left-hand side? That's called, technically, a black box warning. It's the highest level of warning, other than pulling something off the market, that the FDA has to warn prescribers to take notice. There's something very concerning here. There are groups that should not get this. And so that's one part of it. And if you look at the black box warning, it says myocarditis and pericarditis, the rates per 1,000 primary vaccines, these are way too high. Encephalitis, that's inflammation of the brain. Encephalomyelitis, encephalopathy, progressive vaccinia, generalized vaccinia. That means viral infection systemically in the body. This could shut down your organs. Severe vaccinal skin infections, erythema multiforme, including Stevens-Johnson syndrome. It includes sequela, or in other words, results of death, ocular complications, blindness, and fetal death, rapid fetal death. These have occurred following either primary vaccination or revaccination with live vaccinia virus, smallpox vaccines. These risks are increased in certain individuals and may result in severe disability, permanent neurological sequela, or death. That's number 1. Number 2, if you look through the package insert, and I've colored some things in yellow, it says, administer it after being trained. You think the COVID-19 shots were complex in their reconstitution and administration and the multi-steps that people had to take? Most doctors and nurses are not readily trained in what's called percutaneous route, using, and I quote from the package insert, 15 jabs of a bifurcated needle. Let's jump to my picture 3. And let's leave this up for about 15 to 20 seconds. I want people to see this is a bifurcated needle. That means it's got 2 prongs and it's got fluid that comes down the center, and you're jabbing into the skin 15 times. You got people waiting in line, you're gonna jab 15 times, and it is live on the skin until the skin forms scabs. And it says in the package insert, quote, ACAM 2000 should not be injected by the intradermal, the subcutaneous, intramuscular, or intravenous route, because that's live virus. How many people think there's going to be medication errors and they start injecting either intradermally, which I taught you in the previous Dr. Jane show, low angle in under the skin, or even go full blown to the Jynneos full dose of injecting subcutaneously into the fat of the skin. This is rife for medication errors. A droplet of ACAM2000 is administered in this way, percutaneous. Under adverse reactions on the same first page, not sure if we captured that. Yes, you can see it on the right-hand side. This is picture 1 with, it says ACAM PI black box warning for my producer. Common adverse events include inoculation site and symptoms, lymphadenitis, your lymph system is going to go crazy, and constitutional symptoms like malaise, fatigue, fever, myalgia, and headache. Myalgia is muscle aches. Listen to this, look at the second paragraph. Do we have that here? Warnings and precautions. Oh, it's under adverse reactions. Okay, we're going to have to go for that to the PI that I've given. You can scroll on the first page of the PI. On the right-hand side, about halfway down under adverse reactions, it says in the second paragraph, and I need to call your attention to this, inadvertent inoculation at other sites is the most frequent complication. The most common sites are the face, nose, mouth, lips, genitalia, and anus. Why? Because people are going to accidentally touch their vaccine site, rub their eyes, pick their noses, touch their mouths, maybe twist their ear. Anywhere you start to get into mucous membranes, what do you think is going to happen when everybody at home starts getting, they're going to get the infection from the person's vaccine site. That's worse than self-spreading. ACAM2000 may cause fetal infection, resulting in stillbirth or death. So for you mothers, like the ones that ran their babies into those injection centers in New York City, you better take a second look. Live Vaccinia ACAM2000 virus may be transmitted from a lactating mother to her infant. Please don't take this. Please don't take this. It's also associated with an increased risk of serious complications in children, especially infants younger than 12 months. But they've approved it for under 18. I just can't. Okay, so you need to understand that this is not attenuated. Attenuated means that it doesn't replicate. It can't make you sick. This is live, unattenuated. Okay, you need a high amount of training. There are lots of dangers if you don't know what you're doing in giving a percutaneous vaccine. You can infect the person all over. You can get inadvertent infections yourself, the people giving it. You people are nuts. You're perpetrating death to humanity. 6 weeks, there's a 6-week potential to infect others in any kind of contact. Children and babies are increased risk. It's just unbelievable. And before I close out, I want to mention one thing, because we have limited time. We have two-part interview with Dr. Kevin Stillwagon coming up. You don't want to miss this. He and I unpack all of this, and he's got some great educational explanations of why these are all hoaxes, why you should never get a vaccine. Look, one quick note, war, inflation, and we're going $30 trillion in debt right now. It's looking worse than 2008. Millions of Americans watched their retirement savings disappear, while those who invested in physical gold and silver were protected. But if you've got $50,000 or more in your IRA, 401, or any other retirement savings, you could be at risk again. And right now, thousands of Americans are using an IRS loophole to add physical gold and silver to their retirement savings. I want to urge you to call Goldco at 855-791-2619 and get that free gold IRA kit just so you can find out more about it and learn how many other Americans are saving their retirement savings, preserving it, protecting it with gold and silver. Call 855-791-2619. I want to just share a couple more things before I wrap up, because now that we are public, we are a full hour show, And we have to be very careful with our timing. Under page 11 of the package insert, under contraindications, everybody who wasn't tested should be in this section, and yet it's a tiny little paragraph. There are very few absolute contraindications to this vaccine. Are you kidding me? You just put a black box warning for like 1,000 things on the front page, but, quote, there are very few absolute. Horrible. The myocarditis. I'm going to continue to share this because I've got to do a complete tutorial on what it takes to give this, why it's so dangerous, in order to completely edify you to protect yourself. Please stop running to get these shots. Please, please. Don't go anywhere. In the next segment, we've got the one and only Dr. Kevin Stillwagon. He's an incredible teacher to tell you why these are so dangerous and why there is no such thing as a good vaccine. Don't go anywhere. Well, Dr. Kevin Stillwagon was licensed as a chiropractor in Florida and Pennsylvania in 1980. He self-published a book in 1984 on medical freedom, so he was quite the pioneer from day one, and on the dangers of vaccines. He's invented and patented a thermographic device back in 1985 and taught its use worldwide. And if that wasn't enough, he then became an airline pilot in 1987 and was forced to retire in 2020 because he refused to wear a face mask. He began to speak out against mandatory masks and vaccines at school boards, county commissioner meetings, and freedom rallies. And I love having him on the show because he is a great explainer and teacher, and he really understands this hoax. Dr. Stillwagon joins me now. Kevin, great to see you.
Great to see you too, Dr. Ruby.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh my gosh, every time I've seen you speak publicly, I play it over and over again because there's so many things I learn and I pick out. So I'm happy to have you back because there's so many things we could talk about with you, but I wanted to talk to you about what I see, and I'm sure you do as well, as this ongoing monkeypox narrative hoax that is,
yes.
I think being used to drive people, to get these shots. And God knows what's in them. We know what we're told is in them.
Right.
We know what's in documents like the package insert, but we know from experience with the COVID shots, there could be anything in there, and
right.
we wouldn't find out until months after people have taken these. So, overall, what's your impression of, don't let me put words in your mouth, but, is this another hoax?
Well, it's not a hoax, but it's a propagated fear campaign, basically, is what it is. And that's what they tried to get away with the COVID-19. We can call it a hoax because we know there was no pandemic, no real pandemic to begin with. But it's all fear. That's their weapon. They want to scare people into injecting infection, prevent infection. That's what they're doing, and that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. The goal of all of these shots that are called vaccines is to create antibodies. That's the goal. And you have to understand that these are serum antibodies. They are always going to be in your sera, which is your blood and lymph. And so they can only react to an infection. They can never, ever prevent an infection, and they were never designed to do so. And so what natural healers like myself and others try to teach and warn people about is you really need to build up the defenses of your body to keep you from becoming infected in the first place. When you start injecting something directly through that protective layer and directly into your blood and lymph to create antibodies, asking for trouble. Because anytime you inject something into your body, there are risks. And when there are risks, there absolutely has to be a choice. And so here we are in a situation where they mandated the COVID shot onto many sections of the working public and the traveling public, which is, number one, illegal to begin with because it was an experimental product. And so now we're finding ourselves in a similar situation here with this monkeypox shot. They're trying to convince people to line up and inject something into their bodies to create antibodies that can only react to the infection. They can never prevent the infection.
This is a huge point, and you've been very consistent in making this. Let me ask you a question for the audience's sake, because I know you know the answer to this. Given that these shots, whether it's the mRNA, whether it's any of the pseudo-traditional or I don't know which one yet, traditional vaccines coming out in these two, which we're going to talk about and differentiate in a minute. When people say, oh, Dr. Jane, I had my antibodies tested, they're referring to a blood draw where, like you say, within the blood compartment, they're seeing these antibodies. It's almost a false, it's a fraud, because people are coming out saying, well, I have antibodies, Dr. Jane, so how can you say these aren't protecting me? So it's important that they understand what you just taught them.
Yeah, and see, that's why the definition of vaccine was changed, very cleverly changed in September of last year. They took out any reference whatsoever to immunity or protecting you from infection.
Did you hear that?
They said it's going to protect you from the illness or the disease, and those are the symptoms. Okay,
they changed
and so
the definition
that's
vaccine.
the clever dichotomy here. Mm-hmm. Some people are still thinking that it's going to give them protection against infection, but there is absolutely none there whatsoever. The idea is that if you have these antibodies, and specifically what's more important than the antibodies is the memory to remake those antibodies quickly. That's what's most important. Mm-hmm. And so Fauci has got people convinced that when your antibody levels drop, that you no longer have any protection at all. That is absolutely a false statement. The most important thing is the memory to remake them. Antibodies are specific things. There has to be a perfect match between the antibody, which is created inside of you, and the antigen. The antigen is actually proteins that are on the quote, invader, which could be a virus or it could be a bacteria. But there has to be a really good match there. So the problem is if there's not a good match, then these antibodies are not neutralizing, and they won't do anything to give you protection against the symptoms. And Fauci's learning this the hard way, because how many times has he been jabbed? How many times has President Biden been jabbed? And they went ahead and they got sick anyway.
Yeah,
and
if we believe that they did, they might, but who knows? They might just be getting sick from jab people around them. But I wanted to come back. That's very important information for the public to know. You're being duped on that level. Let's go back to maybe sort of a more primary level. What are your thoughts on the audacity of trotting out the PCR test again, that the inventor, Kary Mullis, clearly stated was not a diagnostic tool, had no ability to diagnose anything, and it's never, in spite of the fake fraudulent Corman-Drosten paper, has never been validated to diagnose or consistently diagnose any particular disease.
That's correct. The PCR was designed to look for nucleotides, and that's what these viruses are made of. Viruses are not even living things. They have no intelligence whatsoever. They don't have the desire to attack you. They are just particles of genetic information, and they're wrapped in a shell, and that shell is normally made of proteins and fats. But inside the shell is genetic material. Those are nucleotides. And that's all this PCR test is looking for, is just these little strings of nucleotides. Whether that's tied to the actual presence of a virus or not, nobody's ever proven that it is. It's just the existence of nucleotides, period.
Dr. Stillwagon, why is there such a fervent, passionate, debate, and it's vitriolic about viruses are real and they exist? There's no such thing as a virus. Help me out there. I see evidence on both sides, so I don't get involved in debates either way because I'm still figuring it out. What are your, expert thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a huge problem. Some doctors and scientists and some people say that viruses do not exist, and the reason they say that is because we've never actually seen a virus do what they say viruses do. They say that the virus can attach to the cell, and they say that the genetic material of the virus or the entire virus can get inside of the cell. And then the genetic material or the entire virus is copied inside of the cell, and then those copies are released from the cell. We have the biological explanations for how all of those things happen. And we do have pictures of these particles outside of our cells, inside of our cells, and also attached to cells. But we've never actually seen one do that, and we never will be able to see one do that because of the limitations of electron microscopy. It can only look at dead tissue. And so some of these doctors and scientists have even taken it to the next level and said, well, we see that there are these particles there, but how do we know that that's actually a separate thing? How do we know that that's just not part of cellular material that has broken down and been expulsed from the cell, you see? So that's the problem that we have.
Okay,
but I tend to go along with the fact that we do have pictures of these things, and we know that they are not living things. They are just genetic material packaged in a protein shell. And because they're not living things, they can be made in laboratories. And Fauci has been funding this type of research for decades. And so that's where some of the fear comes in, Dr. Ruby. People are deathly afraid of coming in contact with these man-made particles that can also be called bioweapons. There's no need to fear these things, Dr. Ruby, because your body has the built-in mechanisms to keep those particles out. Where the problem comes in, and this is where we are now, the government and Fauci and people like him and the pharmaceutical industry has convinced people that if you inject this stuff directly into your body, that it will give you some protection. And there's no protection there, as we already talked about. So people like Fauci, they'll even rationalize it, Dr. Ruby. They'll take it to this level. They'll say, oh, well, I did get sick, but thank God I got that shot, because if I didn't, I might be sicker or even dead.
Exactly. How that is a conditioned response. It's prolific and ubiquitous through social media. How successful they've been at that lie. Dr. Stillwagon, I want to bring us back to the other, you're such a great teacher. Really appreciate the way you lay it out. It's so easy to understand for everyone. I want to bring it back to one of the other main reasons I wanted to have you back on is to discuss these two vaccines, however, we want to discuss them, Jynneos, however you pronounce it, and ACAM 2000. First of all, I want to bring up a picture, my picture number one, this whole notion of a global emergency. Just want to take a minute and discuss that with you. This picture, as you can see, is a global map this is all from the CDC website. And they say that there are almost 32,000 confirmed cases, right? Remember,
right.
To the audience, PCR doesn't diagnose anything. It's all based on, these case numbers are based on the faulty, fraudulent PCR. But let's just go along with the joke for a minute. But that they're saying in 2022, the CDC is saying there are 31,000 plus confirmed cases worldwide, 31,000 in locations that have not historically had them, whatever that means. And so, first of all, give me a minute or two on, is this a global health emergency? Because everybody's declaring it as such.
It's not a global health emergency. When you talk about a pandemic or an epidemic, you must consider the mode of transmission of the virus in question. This monkeypox virus is transmissible by direct contact. Some people would have you believe that it's a sexually transmitted disease. Well, it can be because there is direct contact there. But any type of direct contact, prolonged direct contact, is how this virus transmits from person to person. Now, this is entirely different than a respiratory virus like the SARS-CoV-2 virus. which you can breathe in. And when you breathe in that type of virus, it has to physically attach to receptor sites on your epithelium. Mm-hmm. Your epithelium is what separates the inside of you from the outside of you. Okay, and then once that virus is attached to the epithelium, then the virus can be accepted by that cell, and the cell can make more copies of the virus. And when it does, then the virus is released both to the inside of that person, and now you're considered to be infected, and it's also released back into the mucosal layer so that it can be coughed and sneezed out and spread onto others. But this monkeypox virus doesn't work like that. There are no receptors on the epithelium for the monkeypox virus. It has to get directly into the bloodstream. Now, how's that going to happen? It happens when there's a break in the mucosal lining, like a cold sore, for example, in the mouth, or if a person has eczema on their skin, or if a person has
a breach in their skin. Okay.
A breach in their skin.
I don't want to spend too much time on that. People need to understand it's not a deadly illness. In fact, my second picture comes from an FAQ from the CDC themselves, the liars and the propaganda machine. But they have to admit certain realities, and they say here that this West African type that supposedly jumped continents in days are rarely fatal. They say that themselves, right? Of over 99% of people that get this disease are likely to survive. That means it's a 99% survivability rate. But what I wanted to focus on really is that there are reportedly 11,000 or 12,000 cases by these same CDC liars based on a PCR that's fraudulent in the United States, and much less in other parts of there's no viral trail of the population. How did we get 11,000 in the US, but you don't have in surrounding areas or a trail of illness, shall we say? Is that a concern?
Not really. I think the major thing that we need to be concerned about is just understanding that viruses or virus particles or whatever you want to call them, they do transmit human to human all of the time. This is natural. You have 380 trillion viruses on you and in you right now, and without some of these viruses, you would be unable to survive. And we breathe about 100 million various viruses every single day, whether we wear a mask or not. So we are literally swimming in a sea of these viruses.
This is what I try to tell people. You've never lived in a sterile world since you left your mother's womb.
Correct. And so viruses are always contagious or transmissible. They always transmit between humans. And you can't stop that from happening. You could try to lock people down, you could try to social distance people, anything, they will still transmit from human to human.
It made them more sick.
They even found the SARS-CoV-2 virus in Antarctica. So it just spread, they spread. That's what they do. The problem is some people will get sick, but only the people who get sick are the ones that have severe immunosuppression.
Right. I want to move us along because our time with you is precious and it's clicking away. I want to jump to this. Actually, I want to jump to ACAM 2000. I want people to understand just really quick. I know Dr. Stillwagon understands this, but right now there are two that are approved for smallpox. But here's the sleight of hand. They approved it for smallpox, but they're inferring, which means they're just, to the wind, it's going to work in monkeypox. They've never tested it in what they claim is monkeypox, what they diagnose, which is a fraud. So the thing I want to talk about, and I want you to help us understand, Dr. Stillwagon, is Jynneos, which was approved in 2019 for smallpox and is now implied to work in monkeypox, is an attenuated viral material, which means it can't replicate, it can't make you sick. ACAM 2000 is a totally different, it's live, it's not even live attenuated. So it's alive and it's dangerous and it's replicative. What the hell are they talking about? Why are they unleashing it? They're almost really blatantly just saying, we're going to create a smallpox epidemic.
Yeah. I got a lot of heat for that, Dr. Ruby, because I clearly stated that I wanted to go on record and state that if enough immunosuppressed people get the ACAM2000 shot, it will result in the next smallpox epidemic. And I called it the smallpox epidemic, and people said, well, the smallpox virus, which is technically called the variola virus, is not in this ACAM2000. It's the vaccinia virus. Well, that's 100% accurate. It is the vaccinia virus. And they call it a live virus, even though viruses are not living things. They call it live because it retains the ability to be completely copied inside of our bodies and spread onto other people. Okay? That's what the problem is. And so you are purposefully injecting a true infection of vaccinia into a segment of the population who can easily spread it to other vulnerable people, including children. In fact, there's a clear warning right on the insert for ACAM2000 that says if you get this stuff injected into you, don't even handle infants. Do not go near pregnant women. Yeah. And the reason is because if you spread this to a pregnant woman and she's got weak immunity, she is vulnerable, that virus will be copied inside of her body. It will cross the placental barrier. It will affect the fetus, and it will cause malformations in the fetus.
If the
we
fetus
know
survives.
that for sure because this is the exact same vaccine procedure that they used back in the 1960s, and it definitely was tied to fetal damage.
Virus. There's
yes.
You're validating everything I reviewed in the first segment because it is the medical truth. And not only do they have a black box warning for myocarditis and pericarditis, but everything you just stated about the vulnerabilities of pregnant women and fetuses in the unborn. In addition to that, they actually had to come out and say that this goes through the breast milk, right in. You might as well be giving the baby, the newborn baby. So why are they? They claim there's this global emergency. I want to tie these pieces together. That there's, Biden says there's not enough. The stockpile, the U.S. stockpile, we've got to split Jynneos into 1/5 the dose, and based on a study that actually said the opposite. That study actually said, hey, it does the 1/5 dose in a different formulation, by the way, without any testing, right? As a pivotal trial. It's actually got half the efficacy, which was only 59% of the full dose. It's insane. And so why are they pulling out a live smallpox to inject into is this blatant continuation of the mass genocide?
Well, it certainly looks like it is. And, I called it could be the next smallpox epidemic. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the vaccinia virus, Dr. Ruby, if you look at the genetic makeup of the vaccinia virus, it is strikingly similar to the smallpox virus. And so we know, Dr. Ruby, that when viruses are being copied inside of our bodies, mutations occur. And there's a confusion on this because many scientists and physicians are saying that it's the virus that's mutated. That is not correct. It is the human body that is mutating the virus. We have specific enzymes inside of our cytoplasm called ApoBec enzymes that actually direct the mutations of these viruses. And naturally, our bodies are mutating them to become less virulent. In other words, they will be less deadly. They cause less damage, but they are more transmissible. So they will move between the human population easier, but they will not do as much damage. So my personal feeling is the vaccinia virus, which is exactly the same symptoms as smallpox, only less, mutated smallpox. And I feel the same is monkeypox. I believe it's all in the same clade, and they have all been mutations of the original smallpox, which has been with us since the year 1500.